Now let's talk about the second topic that we wanted to cover in this presentation, which is some of the fundamentals of crafting a business case. But before we actually, and what I'm going to do during this subtopic is I'm actually going to be talking about a real life case study that I have worked on from my eBay days, wherein I have been, when I was at eBay, I've worked on a couple of, different business cases. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be leveraging one of the business cases that I worked on and try to kind of, use that as an example or a case study while I walk, this group through what are the fundamentals of crafting a business case itself. But before we actually, start going into the details of this slide, I think it'll be helpful for us to maybe just quickly understand and level set on what is a business case, or what do we mean by a business case. I think if I were to kind of explain this purely from a layman perspective, I think business case is kind of a decision making tool which really allows companies to assess the viability of potential options or potential solutions, opportunities, or strategies. So it's kind of a tool which you by using which there is a consistent structure and set of metrics across all the different business problems that the company is trying to solve for, and it kind of gives an opportunity for the company to actually objectively compare the different business opportunities in front of it, including by looking at the cost, the benefits, the risks, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a standardizing framework is what I would think about as think of what a business case is, that companies use to actually make decisions. Now, uh, now that we've kind of level set on what the definition of a business case is, if you look at the slide, there is a lot going on in there. So let me try to kind of help you guys understand the way that I kind of think about the process of creating a business case. If you look at the first top row on the slide, basically what the objective of any business case should be is to basically convert your business strategy into business results, right? That should be your goal, or that should be the goal, or that is the goal for every company out there, which is they build business cases to convert the strategy into results. And there is a lot that goes on while doing so. So let's get into that. If I were to think about the different steps in the process, or the different milestones that the business case kind of goes through, I think we can think about it from a six, like what kind of exists out there as a 6D model, right? So I've kind of leveraged the 6D model to help folks understand how even business cases are built. The first step in the business case is to actually define the business problem. So now here is where we're actually, companies actually are concerned with, or what goes on in this step is basically outlining what the business problem, or what is the objective that we are trying to solve. What is the business problem that we are trying to solve for. In this step, usually what happens is we identify the different benefits that if the business strategy were to be implemented, what kind of benefits would the company receive, or how would we kind of think about measuring those benefits against the set of, or against the stated business objectives. And let me kind of now weave in the case study that I was talking about from eBay. So when I was at eBay a couple of years back, we were actually trying to build a shipping solution, a kind of a membership based or a subscription based shipping solution. You can think about it as a very close something very close to what you see in Amazon Prime, right? So Amazon Prime, a couple of years back in 2005, when they actually launched it, it was technically at the core of it a shipping solution, wherein somebody is actually subscribing to Amazon Prime, and with that subscription, they're getting free shipping. And that is what really started Amazon Prime, and now we know how big of a success that has been over the years. So when I was at eBay, this is a lot of years back. We were trying to create. So eBay does have a lot of different shipping options and a couple of different shipping solutions, but we were trying to create something which kind of plays into the fast shipping aspect of e-commerce, right? So building a program which was specifically designed on making sure that if somebody orders an item on eBay, it will get delivered to the customer within, let's say, 1 day or 2 days. Now, when I think about from a business case standpoint, the first step that included was defining what the business objective is, right? So defining the business objective, as I said, is to just make sure that we define or outline the business problem. So here, in the case of the eBay business case, the business problem that we are trying to solve for is, you can think about it as being able to drive, growth in your customers or in your orders or your revenue as a result of being able to deliver, your ordered items in a very fast or in a very short amount of time, which is usually about 1 or 2 days. So driving growth based on fast shipping was the way I would kind of characterize the business problem. Now, the second step in design while building the business case is to actually design the business case. So what do we mean by designing the business case, right? So here is where we kind of start, pulling together different pieces of the puzzle in terms of establishing what is the scope of this particular business problem, right? Or what are some of the things that we are going to intentionally exclude from this business case or intentionally include in this business case? What is the rationale of doing this? What are the potential, what are the potential benefits or the rationale behind the benefits that we would see if this business strategy were to be implemented into the market? So here is where, after you define the business problem that you're trying to solve, designing the business case basically is like kind of the first construction phase of pulling all the information together and starting to kind of put the different pieces together from in terms of establishing the scope and the parameters and so on and so forth. So in the case of going back to the eBay business case, now that we had kind of established the business problem, the second step that we took was we basically started kind of outlining the different do's and don'ts. And what I mean by do's and don'ts is which geographies are we going to have this solution into, or what are the different customer segments that we're going to offer this to, or would this be a paid offering, like over and above, like would customers actually have to subscribe for this, or would this be something that would be embedded within within the normal ecosystem itself, which is like, this is not going to be a subscription offering, this is going to be a free offering, but then we are going to somehow create like a model in the back end which will kind of pay for the cost that this project is going to incur. So you start kind of in the design phase, you start kind of discussing high level nuances that this business case would potentially cover. The third step is then we basically start actually developing the business case. So now that you've defined the business problem, you've set some guardrails. Here is where you actually start developing the business case. And what I mean by developing the business case is it might include pulling a lot of data together, making assumptions about what are the potential implications from a cost standpoint, from a growth standpoint, from a technical aspect standpoint. So really kind of trying to leverage data to start making assumptions behind this particular business case. And if you can imagine, this particular step in the business case process is extremely critical, because the assumptions that you would make in this particular step of the business case development is actually the assumptions that you would hold yourself accountable to if this particular initiative were to launch. And that's why companies actually spend a lot of time developing the business case. The majority of the time that goes in is actually in this step, which is developing the business case. The fourth step is, now that you have kind of defined the business problem, you've set the guardrails, you've started pulling data, or you've started pulling the different assumptions or parameters, and you've started kind of putting values against those assumptions, or the expected values against those assumptions. What is the fourth stage, which is the decide stage, is where companies actually start assessing the risk and benefits that the project would offer, and start making recommendations to decision makers, right? So it's a stage in the journey of creation of a business case where potentially the fate of the project, whether it's going to happen or not, starts kind of coming into the equation, right? So that's the fourth stage, which is the decide stage. Now, when we are done with the first four stage, it's a common assumption that if we are going to the fifth stage, that means that the business case has been approved and now we are going into an execution mode. Because the first four stages are about, you know, pitching the business problem, doing all the work necessary to get the right approvals. But then the fifth and the sixth step is actually executing on it. So deploying is basically actually launching whatever initiative or whatever program or whatever product you are building a business case for into the market. And the last stage is basically what I mean by delivering is basically measuring against your expected outcomes. So this is where you start kind of assessing whether all the assumptions that you made as part of the develop phase in the business case, are you able to meet them or not? You start communicating with the executives in the company to see whether you're kind of on track to what you believed would happen, or are we kind of lagging behind, or are we doing even better than what we expected? So here, like this is the measurement stage of the business case. So that is the way I kind of think about the different, the six different steps of the business case. Now, for the purposes of this conversation, if we were to further kind of just bucket these six steps into three pillars, I would say the first pillar would be just defining the problem and understanding the value proposition. And what I mean by value proposition is, the expected outcome and benefits, right? And your define and design stages would be a part of this first pillar, which is the define problems and value prop. The second pillar is to basically identify and select the solution. So now that you've set or you've defined the problem and you've understood or you've kind of thought through the value proposition, you basically identify and select the solution that you want to move forward with. And the last pillar is basically execute and measure, which is also really critical because that is what you really all worked for, which is to launch this program, initiative, program, whatever product in the market, and then measure it against some of the assumptions that you had in there. Now, talking a little bit about, what are the detailed steps, as part of creating this business cases. Some of the different steps across each pillars is in the first pillar itself, in the define problem and value prop. We spoke about, setting or declaring what the strategic goals and objectives are behind creating this business case, and how does this business case kind of help drive the strategy of the company forward. It is to discuss the expected outcomes and benefits. It's to look at the value of the risk, or rather the risk that potentially exists out there, and the value of the benefits that we would see in return. And then also talking about the complexity and the scale of the initiative that we're trying to launch. From an FP&A standpoint, where I see us engaging in the first pillar is in three different ways, is the way I would think about it. The first one is, I think FP&A plays a really critical role in making sure that the business case is tied to the strategy of the company. So in my case, when I was working on the eBay business case, the shipping, in terms of creating the shipping solution, one of the first things that I was looking into is this really connected with where the company wants to move, or the company wants to go in the future, right? From a financial standpoint, from a growth standpoint, from a profitability standpoint. And it's really important that finance is kind of included in the very early stages of the business case creation itself, because sometimes what can happen is there might be some really fantastic ideas that business teams or marketing teams can come with, and they kind of start building the business case. They go through the first couple of steps, and only after they've spent a lot of time is when they realize that from a financial perspective, this is absolutely not connected with where the CFO wants to take the company, right? And different companies have different mindset at different point of time. There are some companies which are purely trying to kind of drive growth, even if it means in a slightly unprofitable manner. And there are some companies who want to drive a good balance between profitability and growth. And that is where I think the FP&A team really kind of needs to step in the first early stages of the business case creation itself, to make sure that the business case is tied to the strategic direction in which the company wants to go. The second, I think, important step or important role that FP&A plays in the first pillar itself is the customer impact. I think it should be, I'm very sure that the marketing teams and the product teams and the engineering teams think about the customer impact first and foremost as well while creating the business case. But I think the FP&A team plays a role in terms of connecting or translating that, quantifying that customer impact in terms of metrics that we usually look at in our day-to-day job. So for example, in the eBay business case, when we were talking about creating this new shipping solution, one of the things that I was looking for is, okay, let's understand what is, if we look at all the orders that are placed on eBay on an annual basis, how many orders today are delivered within 1 day? Or how many orders are delivered in 2 days? How many orders are delivered in 3 days? So if we just look at that histogram, it gives us a good perspective on where are we falling into that spectrum today. And is the problem that we are trying to solve, is that really a problem that exists today? And it turned out to be a real problem that exists today, because one of the things that is kind of the perception of eBay is that the shipping is slow, right? And that kind of showed up in the data as well. So definitely, if we were to launch this kind of a solution, the FP&A team can start making assumptions or start creating potential scenarios of how this solution is going to help improve that metric. And it's very important for FP&A teams to actually, narrow down some select KPIs that they are going to consider as the most critical while building a business case. It could be anything. It could be revenue. It could be monthly active users. It could be your orders. It could be, it could be any metric that you consider as important for your business, and really trying to translate the customer impact in terms of that metric. And the third one is, of course, the competitive advantage. From a finance perspective, we're always wanting to make sure that we help cross-functional teams understand how the solutions that they are bringing to the market for the company, how is that going to give us a competitive advantage versus our competitors. So I think those are the three kind of critical steps that I think, or roles, a role that FP&A teams play in the first pillar. In the second pillar, when we are in the identifying and the selecting the solution phase, I think there are, again, a couple of very critical steps that FP&A plays. I think probably this is the step where FP&A plays the most, or the most critical role, I would say. One is just clearly, kind of summarizing what the investment plan is going to look like, or what are the investments going to look like. How much is going to be the cost to fund this initiative? What is our P&L potentially going to look like? What does this mean for our margins? What does this mean for our revenue projections? What does this mean for the cash flow that the company would need to have, or would be able to create, or would see over the next couple of years? So clearly kind of articulating what the P&L is going to look like, and what the investment details are going to be is a critical step that happens in this particular pillar. There is a lot of ROI and cost benefit analysis that goes in, because we're trying to create a business case. So FP&A teams will heavily work with their business partners to quantify what the return on investment is going to look like, what are the different cost benefit options going to look like for the different options within the business case. And there are a lot of scenarios that we will create as well, saying there'll probably be like a best case scenario, there'll be like a worst case scenario, there'll be like a base scenario. So you will create a lot of scenarios. And the whole point of creating all of these, different scenarios, or doing the cost benefit analysis, is to be able to give the executives an understanding of what is the potential range of outcome from a financial perspective that we could see if something goes really well once we launch this into the market, or if something goes really bad once we launch this into the market, both from a cost perspective as well as from a revenue or any other important metric that you consider close to your business. And then in the execute and measure stage, I think what becomes extremely, again, we play from an FP&A standpoint, we play an extremely critical role, which is that of making sure that, one, we are communicating the financial impact on an ongoing basis to our executives. So that becomes extremely critical. The second is making sure that we are holding the teams accountable to the budget that was sanctioned or approved for this particular initiative. So budget compliance and budget forecasting and budgeting in general becomes a very critical step on an ongoing basis once we actually launch the solution in the market. And then the third one potentially also becomes really critical, which is the risk management. So not all initiatives become successful as soon as they launch in the market, right? So one of the critical roles that FP&A plays in this phase or this step is to actually work with the business partners to manage the risk to the most extent possible. It could be in terms of investment trade-offs. It could be in terms of making minor shifts in the strategy, in the go-to-market execution strategy, to make sure that we are compliant to the budget, or we're reducing the risk exposure that our business has. So these are the different kind of steps that FP&A team will play, or the different work streams that FP&A will be involved in into the third pillar.